If I know that about how the contractor's working, I want to defend him or her. I want them to get what they need.
Hey, it's Brad here. And before we get into the show, I want to tell you about the show sponsor. Now, I personally use this company in my own business. And so I was thrilled whenever they reached out and said they wanted to sponsor the show. Today's sponsor is JobTread. JobTread is an all-in-one construction management software. JobTread streamlines processes for builders and contractors from estimating and scheduling to job costing and invoicing. With JobTread, you can create precise estimates quickly, improving the chance of winning jobs. And their dynamic scheduling allows you to keep projects on track with Gantt charts and scheduling tools. JobTread also allows you to collaborate with teams, vendors, and clients in one location. No more missed information. Who said, she said. It's all in one location. And their API integration tools connect with your favorite software like QuickBooks Online, Hammer CRM, or any other API-friendly apps. JobTread is perfect for builders and contractors of all sizes. Whether you're a solo contractor or run a large team, JobTread scales to fit your needs and works great for remodelers, home builders, deck builders, pool builders, and general contractors. Try JobTread today and learn how it can help streamline, manage, and grow your construction business. Visit jobtread.com or click the link in the show notes for more details. Now let's get to the show. Hey guys, welcome back to this episode of the Hammer Grind Podcast. Today I have another special guest with me today, Amy Barrackman. Amy,
Hello.
welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
We're going to have a great conversation today because of what you do for a living. So share with everyone listening and watching what exactly you do for a
Well,
living.
I know a lot of contractors listen to this show. So when I tell you that I am an interior designer, what kind of vision does that does that give you? Does that give you positive feelings or negative? I don't know. That's what I hope we can talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, let's be honest. Both sides of the aisle can be difficult at times. They can be fun at times or great. We're going to have a great conversation today, kind of talking about that relationship and how we can make it better from both
Definitely.
sides. And then anything else that pops up along the way, we'll definitely chat about it. So
It's going to be
I'm
fun.
excited. Are you ready, Amy?
I'm so ready. I'm so excited. I've been really looking forward to this.
All right. So what do you see? Let's just start with let's go right for
Go
the
right for the
number one. Yeah, I mean, like, what do you see the biggest challenge from an interior designer side? What is the biggest challenge working with contractors?
that. Okay. So, well, first of all, I love working with contractors I and I'm not saying all designers feel this way, but I recognize I can't do a good job. I can't achieve what I want to achieve without a contractor. Right? Like I'm heavily dependent on a contractor. So I think maybe the challenge is the feeling is not mutual. I think some of the contractors I've worked with, they kind of feel like they don't need me on the job and that I complicate things, which I totally understand and fully admit that I do, that we, as interior designers, we do. And one of the reasons I'm so excited to talk to you about this is because I've always felt that when we work together, we create such a better product. And actually, I can really, all the designers can be helping the contractors deliver the best product and also sometimes playing intermediate when there are things going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I've mentioned before we started that I have worked with a lot of interior designers over the years. Some phenomenal, some not so great,
Hmm.
and so I've experienced both sides of that. I do have a silly little nuance thing that, in my opinion, I think it's kind of humorous, but I can see where it could be a little bit different for interior designers. What's the difference between an interior designer and an interior decorator?
Is this a genuine question or are you going to make a
Yes.
joke?
No, it's
Oh, okay.
no.
Well,
Yeah.
that is a very good question that in the industry we're still figuring out. I mean, there is, in some states, you must actually acquire a certification to be considered an interior designer. What happened
Okay.
is a lot of people started calling themselves interior designer, and then if you didn't have that qualification, you could just kind of build the business. So we came up with this interior decorator thing, and then that got degraded. So no one wants to be called an interior decorator. I've always
Mm.
said, I don't care what you call me. I don't care if you call me an interior designer, interior decorator. I think my work speaks for itself. So if my work applies to what you are looking for, then I'm the right person for you.
Well, I love that answer. I mean, that's I'm the same way. I mean, it's kind of like being called a contractor. Like, you're just, it's a general term or whatever. General
Contractor,
contractor,
builder.
contractor. Yeah, builder, subcontractor. To me, it doesn't matter. It's just a label. And, if someone's ignorant about what it is, it's not a big deal. But I know a lot of interior designers who get really upset if you call them an
Yeah, they're
interior
out there. I
decorator.
get it. And look, a lot you work hard for that certification, so I
Sure.
get it, but I just think that's a fight not worth having.
Yeah.
And you know what else? I'm so glad you mentioned that, like, the parallels, because I think that's something that we will talk about a lot during this conversation is, and maybe not all contractors realize the amazing amount of parallels. Interior designers are running a business just like contractors, and we all know what a struggle that can be from time to time. We're working with subcontractors that are different. We're working with wallpaper people, we're working
Yeah.
with the painters, we're working with a handyman. They're different subcontractors, and I'm not diminishing that, what you guys do is actually building a house and extremely valuable. But there's so many parallels. So whether it's what people are calling us or how we're working with our subs, how we're managing the job, we have so much in common.
Oh, I agree 100%. Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt. And I have this conversation all the time with my clients. It's like you need to have a good relationship with interior designers because they will bring you clients, right?
Hmm.
And if you have a good relationship, then they become an asset as well in terms of working on a project together. So, like I said, I've worked with many different interior designers, and I always try to make it a little bit easier for them, but at the same time, knowing that sometimes requests that are being made are like, maybe the designer doesn't understand what they're asking of the contractor. And it's like, no, we can't do that. Or what you're asking is, way beyond scope of work or whatever it
Hmm.
is. So I do think there needs to be from both sides of the aisle, trying to understand the other side to better work together
Right.
because both sides can become great assets for each other.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that and that you recognize that, because there are times when in the past where I've gone in and I can tell before I get there that the contractor has decided that they don't want me on the job. And I understand. And look, I can charm the pants off a lot of people. But in that situation, the contractor is not my client. So, it can be delicate. I would say to anyone listening, and I recognize there aren't a lot of interior designers listening, but I'll talk to them, you guys. I'll handle, I'll talk to all the designers. But I would say go into it with an open mind, because you're right. We as designers don't understand exactly what you're doing. And on the flip side, the contractors don't always understand what we're trying to achieve. And so much of it can be solved with communication. And I've had these amazing relationships with contractors where they're leaning on me. And of course, I'm leaning on them, but they're leaning on me like, hey, can you tell her that, like, this piece of hardware is not going to work, or like she wants the sink to be this, or sometimes it's a an unintentional mistake, right? Something that just happened along the way, and I can work with the client. I have the in, like, I
Yep.
have that ability to say, look, like, these are things that come up across in the scope of a job. These things just happen. This is normal. And I can really smooth over a lot of stuff on my contractor's behalf. So
Oh,
we can work
100%. Yeah.
together.
Well, a lot of that too depends on how the different parties come into the relationship,
Hmm.
right? So like if a client comes to you and says, "Hey, we want to remodel a kitchen or whatever." And then, do you know any contractors that we can use?
Right.
And then you introduce that relationship. Right now, it's kind of they're relying on you. Or if a contractor is dealing with a customer and then they bring in an interior designer that they work with, right? So now it's like one party is kind of leading the charge, the other one's taking a back seat, vice versa,
Right.
depending on how that relationship is started. And I'm assuming you experience the exact same thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I've gone through it both ways. You mentioned that, designers can bring you business. And I think that is a really valuable part of working together because I have worked with contractors where when we get along, when we can work through problems, because obviously we all know there's going to be a problem, right? Something's going to come up on the job.
Yep.
We're used to it. We are problem solvers. We're doing it on the fly. So when we can work together and make each other better during that, I want to take that contractor along with me. And I'd argue, look, I'm not trying to make a gross generalization, but interior designers bring good clients because they
Yeah.
have to have that other level of cash flow and willingness to make the job turn out well to bring an interior designer on. So, I had a conversation after overhearing something at my favorite cabinetry store about how he didn't value interior designers. He didn't know I was in the next room. I had a conversation with him and I said, look, I'm right now what I'm doing in your workshop is I'm making sure that my client's 3-tier dessert platter fits into one of these cabinets. Do you do that when you do a kitchen? He was like, no. And I was like, I'm a layer of security for you. I'm going to be able to make sure that the client is getting all of these things so that you don't get the callbacks. And he said, I have to tell you, I have one builder that always has a designer on site and we never get callbacks there. I have another contractor who is kind of doing it himself and inevitably I have to go back. I have to change things. They want different hardware. They want drawers, whatever it may be. So I hope that we can offer that. And also, I want to hear what you think, what designers could do better in our approach to help you do your job better.
Yeah, that could be a whole day-long conversation to talk about that aspect
I
of it.
get that.
I think we also need to kind of set the bar here is like on both sides, contractors and designers. There's good ones and there's bad ones, right? And so we have to remove kind of the bad ones from the conversation because it'll ruin it for everyone, like no matter what.
Right.
So
And if they're listening to this podcast, they're obviously a good one. You're invested in your business. You want to make
yeah,
it better. So anyone out there who cares enough to tune in, we can just assume that they're on the good side and that any challenges that are coming up are because people are still learning to work together. And there are a lot of designers who don't know how to work with a contractor. It's definitely something I had to navigate and learn the hard way sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. I think that the kind of the stigma stereotype that you will with designers from a contracting perspective is that it's all like grandiose and like over the top and everything's got to be perfect,
Mm-hmm.
and down to the 30-second centered and all this stuff. And that I've had those experiences, but I wouldn't say that's the normal across the board experience. What's your thoughts on that from your how would you categorize other design or the design industry in terms of some of those things?
I completely understand where that stereotype comes from of just making everything too big and taking everything to the next level, complicating things. And I can't say that I've never been guilty of that. But I also think that when the communication's really good, when the designer is really explaining what he or she is trying to achieve to the contractor, then the contractor can find ways to make it happen. And sometimes the contractor thinks the designer is making something bigger than they really are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I've had that in a job where, like, I'll just give you an example. I was working on a room. Look, just like you guys, I have so many details that I have to manage. I'm managing what color light bulb goes in. I'm managing where the picture frame gets hung. And I know it's not as elaborate, but I have so many details. So when it comes down to like the perfectionism, I can't manage everything to perfection. Now that's my take. I know there are designers out there who are super perfectionists, but my feeling is if it looks straight, it's straight, right? Like if it if it functions well, it functions. It doesn't matter if the level says what it says. So I had a perfect example where I went into this room. I had been in a car accident that morning, so I was really cranky.
I would
And
imagine.
this contractor who I really like and I had worked with before, and we did a great problem, but I don't know, maybe he was cranky that day. And I said, okay, we're working on constructing this whole thing around the fireplace. But in addition to this, I need you to put recessed lights in the ceiling. And it's a standard size living room. I want 6 recessed lights. Um, and he's like, okay, well, where do you want them? And I'm like, okay, well, I want them in 2 rows and I want them evenly spaced in the room so that the whole room gets flushed with light. And he's like, but you need to tell me where they go. And I was like, well, I just told you where. I want 2 rows, right? 3 and 3. I want them even, just center in the space. He's like, I'm going to need you to, and he just kept pushing back. You need to mark it. You need to measure. You need to give me the numbers. And I was really frustrated. And I was like, please don't start with me today. Just put up 6 lights. Now, from a contractor's perspective, I get it. You don't want me to come back and be like, well, that's not where they went. Right?
Yeah.
My feeling as a designer is if I say I want them evenly spaced in the room and then it's not exactly what I picture, well, that's on me. Right? So I don't know. Maybe he could have said, okay, I'm going to space them evenly in 2 rows. Will you sign off on liability that I get to choose? And I would have laughed and said, absolutely. Right? So
Yeah.
this is kind of the type of thing. It's these dumb things that don't matter. And meanwhile, he and I are creating this amazing fireplace with all these details. We're going through all the trim. And when it comes to that, I want to be like really involved in the details. So I don't know. What's your take on that story? Do you think I was being ridiculous? Was he being over the top?
No.
Both? What?
Well, so no, I don't think you're being ridiculous. I think in that scenario, you're probably more of the outlier than the norm. I
Okay.
think, and that's why contractors, they want you to sign off and say, put it here, 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 and here, because when you come back in the next day and say, no, that needs to move 1 inch to the
Oh,
right,
yeah.
and it's like you don't understand like what you're at. I mean, yes, it can be done. Obviously, it can be
Right.
done, but if you would have just taken 15 minutes and laid it out, we could have avoided this. Now you just gave me 3 hours worth of additional work.
Fair.
Even if I bill the customer for it, it's still extra work. You know what I mean? So like that's where my brain was going. The second you were saying just make it evenly spaced, I was like, you better lay it out for me.
And you know what? I respect that. I respect and he and I have a good relationship and we've
Sure,
continued to
sure.
work together. But I respect that you want the details. And I think it comes down to communication because if he had said, "Hey, look, I just got to make sure these are exactly where you want them because if you come back and they're not, it's not going to be easy to move." I would have been
Yeah.
like, "It's no problem if you because okay, this is a challenge that I want you to weigh in on." Okay. I am an interior designer, which means and I know all contractors can relate. I have to know everything about the house, right? I have to know every anything under the roof. I have to understand it in some way. But so when it comes to something like lighting, I have a really good grasp on what that means, but I'm not a lighting expert, right? So
Right.
a lot of times I'll say to a contractor, look, I want you to flush the room with light. I want there to be, I don't want shadows. I just want recessed lights. And they're like, well, do you want the 4-inch or the 6-inch? I'm like, okay, I think I want the 6-inch because my experience in the past has been that that gives me the widest spread. So that's going to flush the light. But you're the expert, especially if I'm talking to an electrician, you're the expert on lighting. So can you tell me what is the best for flushing the room with light? This is what I'm trying to achieve. So I want your knowledge. Tell me, should I do the 4-inch? Is the 6-inch dated and we don't want that anymore? Like, please give me all the details. And sometimes I struggle with that. So what do you think about that?
Well, this is actually really interesting because you said that we're the expert, and a lot of times we're not the expert on everything about that. So, like, if
Just like we're
I'm a
not.
general contractor, so if I hire an electrician to come in and put the lights in, I'm relying on his expertise to tell me, lighting, distribution, all that stuff. And so, like in that instance, sometimes if you're coming to me and be like, "Hey, where should we do it?" Like, I don't, and I talk about this all the time, Amy, but it's an ego thing. Like, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm talking about in front of you. You know what I mean? And so, like, you
I get it.
inadvertently, you can back me into a corner that I don't like. And so my, flight or flight response, like I'm going to kind of push back. And also from our perspective, we feel like you should be an expert in that subject because you're the one that's supposedly putting in lights all the time on all these projects. And so it kind of puts us in the middle of a conversation that we may not actually be equipped to answer.
So
Does
it's
that make
funny
sense?
because it seems like we both feel the same way, right? Like
Yeah.
I feel like, well, you guys are putting in recessed lights all day, every day. I'm doing it once a month. Like you guys know more than I do. And you're probably thinking, well, you're the designer. Like you should
Right.
know. So we're really coming from the same spot. And I do think as a contractor and as a designer, you're expected to know everything. And it's hard to say, like, well, I don't know. Like you don't want to look green, right? Like you don't want
Yeah.
to be like, well, I don't know exactly how far apart they should be in order to achieve this lighting effect I'm going for. So I think it's a place we both can learn to say, like, okay, here's my experience. I had success with this, and I'll say I had success with this. And maybe we need to get the electrician in there too to be like, although frankly, even sometimes when I'm working with an electrician, I feel like we're not communicating
Oh
the
yeah.
same
Yeah.
language. Like I'm like, this is what I want to achieve. And like they're like, well, you could do it with this, and this. So
Yeah.
um, I think options are good, right? If we say we want lights and you say how, where, we say flush the room and you're like, but tell me where. I think it's good for you and me to be like, okay, I think I want 6. Should I do 6 or 8? And then you can say, I think you need 8. Or, and if we are going back and forth with our info, with our knowledge and our info, we just get so much better because I don't have all the info and you don't have all the info. So then we can just be a really good team.
Yeah, I can. I already know what a lot of guys listening to
Good.
to
I
this
want to hear it.
conversation are thinking, and that is like, so this is just from a practical standpoint, right? That like it's for us, it's like an extra conversation that we don't want to have or need to
I
have.
see.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if we're dealing directly with the homeowner, then I'm just going to the homeowner and I'm like, hey, Cindy, where do you want, do you want lights in here? Where do you want them at? And she's like, I don't know, maybe here, maybe 6 or 8 or so. And then I'm like, okay, cool. And then I go tell the electrician, hey, they want 6, space them out. And like for us, that's like a 15-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But then I feel like whenever you bring in a third party in this scenario, then it turns into like an hour-long
Right.
conversation and you got to go back to the homeowner if I ask you a question, and then there's a delay in that information. And so for us it just feels like it's more conversation, which at the end turns into more time spent,
Mm-hmm.
which then
Less
translates into
profit.
more money, right? Less
Absolutely.
profit.
I totally get that. And I think that is a really good point. And my counterpoint would be when you go to the homeowner and you ask them what lights they want, they will tell you, I don't know, I just want
Yeah.
like the room to be bright. And then you do the right thing, which is you go get what you think are good bright lights. But what I think designers have to offer is you're not going to get the client saying, oh, well, these integrated LEDs are 5,000 K and now my room looks like a hospital, which you shouldn't have to know. I think the designer can help you a lot with, okay, it has to be 3,000 K because we want that warm incandescent feeling. I want, whenever I put in recessed lights, they've got to be warm dim. They can't just be the regular dim that turns off the light. I want the warm dim so I have the same feeling as an incandescent where the light goes a little orange as it turns off. Those types of details create a better outcome in the project. So, I agree with you. We don't need more conversations, right? Like we have enough conversations. And some designers can be long winded. I mean, not me, but some.
Take a little
So,
bit of sarcasm.
well, I've never been accused of that. But so anyway, my point is let's try. If there's an interior designer, I agree. We're adding this like third party that now you have one more person you have to get through to get the job done. That is annoying. And I would say if we can find a way to do it more efficiently, but also let that interior designer be your insurance policy. Okay, the client wants lights. The interior designer specified, maybe she didn't show you exactly where they should be, but it's on her now. But you don't tell the client that, you tell the
Right.
designer that. Okay, if you don't tell me the color temperature of the light, if you don't tell me the width, if you don't tell me if you want to baffle or whatever, then I'm taking the lead, but you're responsible. Or maybe it's, I mean, I'm working through this. Maybe it's texting the designer, okay, this is what we're doing. 6 lights with 3000K, warm dip, whatever, so that he or she can be like, I had that info. And if I didn't say something then, it's on me.
Yeah, it's such a interesting dynamic, and I think that's the relationship between a designer and a contractor. I think it's unique in the, in the construction industry between any other relationship. I just think it's something
Very
very
unique.
unique about that relationship. And again, going back to, taking out all of the bad designers or the bad contractors, kind of removing them from the equation. Whenever you're working with an actual professional, it can make a huge difference. So let me ask you this: what would you say are some questions, or how would a contractor know if they're dealing with a designer who is going to bring value and be an asset to them in that process? What would you say are some questions or some things to look for?
That's a, that's a really good question. So, off the top of my head, I'm not thinking of like, here's a question that will tell you who you're working with.
Right.
But if you set expectations with a designer and say, this is what I want you to specify how wide the molding is, just the color temperature of the lights. If you set very clear expectations, that designer should be able to rise to that. A good designer will be able to either rise to the occasion or tell you where that's a challenge. So, one example I'm thinking of is I do a lot of built in cabinetry in living rooms. It makes a huge difference. Gorgeous. And built in cabinetry, from my perspective, is something you really want a designer present on because you're spending a lot of money. And if the design doesn't come out, if the cabinetry doesn't quite look the way the client wants, you know, that's a big loss. They can be really frustrated. So the designer can offer a lot, but I am not a designer that, like, I do a lot of sketching by hand. I kind of missed the whole CAD thing in school.
Mm.
I was there, like, kind of learned it, but we were still doing a lot by hand. So, one time I had a contractor who said, I need drawings. I need architectural drawings. I need installation instructions. And I said, great. I'm going to give you my sketches. I'm going to do as much as I can, but I would like to be there when this part of it happens and when this part of it happens so that I can make sure that we're on the same page. Now, I'm sure that was annoying for him, right? To have to like call one other person, but it did create a really good product and the client was absolutely thrilled. There were no questions about, oh, well, should that molding have been a little bit weird or different or whatever. So if you set the expectations for the designer, my feeling is if they will either rise to it or tell you what they need from you, I hope. Is that fair?
Do you think that someone who doesn't want to do that, then if they start to get, pushback on providing that information, would that be a red flag that maybe they're not up to snuff, in your opinion?
Okay, so this is a really interesting thing. I think everyone's coming from different levels of
Mhm.
knowledge, and I think in most cases, and I can't speak for everyone, I think the designer probably has a really close relationship with the client, usually.
Oh yeah,
Probably closer than the contractor and the client.
yeah. Unless the contractor brought in the designer, I would agree 100% with you
Yeah.
on that.
And I don't know how all designers work, but I become very close with my clients. I know, how many pairs of underwear they have. I
Mhm.
know like things that you don't know about your normal friends or your family even because I'm in their house. I know everything about them. So
That's part
I
of your job. I mean, to be a
right.
designer, you really have to be an eye personality. You have to be, you want to emotionally connect with them. You need to know how this is going to make them, affect their lives and their emotions. So it's a very emotional relationship that you guys have. So it makes complete sense.
That's exactly right. And that's why I don't know that if you don't think a designer is up to snuff, I don't know that there's a battle to be won. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know. Are you asking me, like, okay, this person clearly doesn't have the experience, so that you would be able to go to the client and say, this is what I'm getting?
Not so much an experience level, but a relational
Willingness.
level. So like, are you going to be difficult to work with? Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I going to be, it's going to be like pulling teeth to get information, or
Right.
you're going to you can't start working till 10 o'clock in the morning, and you got to have your latte with you, like that kind of, you know what I mean? Like, is that how I'm going to be
What?
experiencing our
What are
relationship?
you talking about? We're not like that at all. No, I'm joking. And by the way, I get up at 5, but that's not the point. No, you're right. You're going to get that. And that's a personality thing. Here's what I would say. I would love to hear the comments on this podcast. I just am dying to know what everyone thinks.
I think it's going to be great.
I think it's going to be great too. I really think that there needs to be a formal meeting, not with or without the client, but a regular meeting. Because here's
Oh,
what happens is, I know, and you guys, contractors can relate to this better than anyone. When I'm on the job site, I am there. I know what's going on. I'm ready to make decisions. But sometimes I can't always make those decisions, right? Sometimes there are things that come up and I need to go back. When I'm not on the job site, I've got 6 other people calling me and they want info about their job site. So it does sometimes become out of sight, out of mind. So one piece of advice, if possible, in a job is have a set meeting, like on Tuesday at 12 or whatever it may be. We're going to touch base on the job site. Um, I think that's your best way to make sure that no matter what that designer's work ethic is, you at least have them there. And should this become a problem later, you've done all your due diligence. So they can't just claim that you didn't want to work with them or that you were being difficult, because you've really put in that effort.
yeah. I mean, well, you just said it. It takes effort. Like, it takes to have a good relationship between the contractor and designer. It takes effort. It takes humility, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I say all the time, contractors are terrible egos, and that's usually what gets us in trouble. But from both sides, if you're truly trying to work together and actually provide a great product and experience for the customer, and it's a customer first kind of
Mm-hmm.
focus, then I think you can have a great relationship. I've had great relationships with designers that I've used, and I've also had bad relationships, not bad relationship, but bad
Right.
experiences. I've fired designers. Like, they would call me like, "Hey, can you come do this?" Like, no, I'm not working for you anymore because you're so
Right.
unorganized, and you're literally wasting the client's money because you don't know what you're doing, or you're not organized enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be a part of that. And I've been in a relationship where I was like, or an experience where the designer was telling basically, I'm sure you'd agree with this, like, some designers want to use the client's money to fund their ideas, right?
What does
Versus
that mean?
the designer trying to make the client's ideas come to life. She was one of those that would want to use the client's money to fund her ideas. And there were some ridiculous ideas, and so there was there were times where I'm like trying to not undercut, but like tell the client directly, like, this, you really don't need this, like, from a practicality or a functional standpoint, like, this is not going to work out for
Oh my
you.
gosh, you
It was
just
it was
hit
like
such a
it was like
nerve.
it was like a laundry room cabinets, putting cabinets in a laundry room, and
Hmm.
the layout that she came up with was atrocious. And I had worked with my cabinet designer, and we came up with a much better idea and presented to her, and she lost her mind. The designer lost her mind, thought I was trying to go around her back, and I'm like, anyways, like, we've all had experiences
Okay, but can we
similar
talk
to that.
about, let's talk about that, because that is, okay, that really hits a nerve, because I've been in situations like this, and I am not look, not every designer's good, right? Like, but a big problem that other designer friends have had is we need the contractor to stay in their lane. Ooh,
Sure.
sorry for the ego bump. But here's the thing. If you stay in your lane, you are going to have a happier customer. Okay. So I totally see what you're saying. And yes, there are designers funding their ideas. I get it. But assuming the client has signed off on it, I need my contractor to say, okay, or I think this is a better idea over here, but it's not about that. I'm here to build, I'm here to create, I'm here to get things done. The designer has been brought in to come up with the ideas. That's all we have to sell, really. I mean, we sell other things, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we're ideas people. So I would say that I think contractors should put in a bad design even if they don't think it's right, because if there's a designer on the job, right? And
Yeah.
then again, I've said it before, but I'll say it again, like it's if you say I'm here to put in the design that you give me, and if the client doesn't like the design, if it ends up not working out for them, it's 100% on the designer. Whereas if you say, hey, look, I don't think this is the best thing, this is what would be so much better, and then the client is ultimately not happy with something you may not have anticipated, it's really on you, right? Because you've taken over the role of being the designer by saying, I think there's a better design.
Don't you think there's a little bit of responsibility though from both sides to at least bring it up and make it? I mean, maybe it's I gave you like the
Right.
the 2 minutes the quick version of that whole situation, but I mean, it's also I feel responsible if a designer comes in and says, "Do that, put these cabinets in," and I know from my experience, this is not going to work. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have doors crashing into each other and like functionally it's not going to work out, but that's what the designer wanted. I feel like I have an obligation to the customer, again, depending on how that was brought into the relationship. If the designer brought in the contractor, that's different. If they somehow mutually came in together separate of each other, that's a different dynamic, and so on and so on. But in this case, she brought me in as the contractor. She was a designer. I had worked with her on several projects, but I just feel like there's a responsibility to the customer to be like, and then on the back end of that, I hear what you're saying. Like do what it's kind of like shut up and do what you're told kind of feeling. That's what it
That's
feels
more
like.
harsh than I mean it to be. Just,
Well, I mean,
I'm not going to
just
tell you how to install things, right? Don't tell me how to design.
Hey, just a quick timeout from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community, the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
but I feel like that's kind of like the well, that's what it's like giving orders. But I still feel like there's a responsibility to like tell someone like, hey, this isn't going to work.
You know what? You are right. When it comes to that, okay. So, and you can predict things that maybe not all designers can. So, I'm all about questions. So, if I were in your shoes, now look, I'm not an expert contractor, but if I were in your shoes and I saw this, I would say, hey, have you worked with something like this before? Because I have, and I'm noticing that this is this might crash it, this could be problematic. We've run into this problem before on this job, or I can foresee. um, Asking questions, I think, is the best way to do it. So okay, let's just say we're in this situation, you and I, you're working with the client, and then the client brings me in later. So you have the relationship with the client first. And I deliver a design that makes sense to me, but is stupid. Okay. I would really appreciate, as a designer, really, really appreciate a phone call or a text to say, hey, I just want to talk with you about this. I've been working with this client for a while and I have a sense, and look, you're the designer, so I'm not disagreeing with your design, but I am concerned about how this is going to come out because of X, Y, and Z. And a really obvious thing that you do that we don't always consider is like the door opening into the cabinet, things like that, that we should sketch out, but not every designer does. But I would really appreciate a phone call about that and say, this, I just want to let you know what I'm thinking and give the functional reasons why the design could be a problem. If a contractor tells me their thoughts on that, at least, I can't speak for all designers, but I am so grateful. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you so much. I'm still going to probably go to my design and adjust it so that it works a little better. But I would really, really appreciate that as a designer versus you going to the client, even though you have the relationship first, if you could give me a heads up and give me an opportunity to correct it. And then, yeah, I agree, fire designers, and same thing, vice versa. If I don't think we should waste time working with people where we don't jive, because a lot of it's relationship, a lot of it's personality. And if it's not working, there are so many fish in the sea.
Yeah, I mean I would agree with you on that. Obviously, it all comes down to communication. I mean, this is something I beat a dead horse on. Effective communication. It applies to everything: relationships, kids, clients, vendors, subs, professionals, like just across the board. Having effective communication is the answer to cure most problems in the world.
Yeah, and designers and contractors have different, naturally, the people who are drawn to one career and the other tend to have different communication styles. So it's like a perfect storm in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, contractors are like, just give me the plans or give me the details and then leave me alone. Like, don't come and micromanage. Don't come and ask me questions. Don't come and tell me something looks different. Because it's just like, give me the marching orders and then let me be. Don't come in and change things, and then obviously, I mean, I make fun of contractors all the time, and I talk about how bad we are as well, but contractors don't like changes, even though it's crazy because construction is such a dynamic, environment. Like, and stuff always changes. It always changes, but we don't we want to control, as few changes as possible in our world. And then we just see designers as like people just constantly making changes, and it drives us nuts.
Okay. Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure, yeah,
So, okay,
absolutely.
let's say I'm on a job and I have a design that I've worked out. Yeah, I've sketched it. I've worked it out on the computer. I have all these inspiration photos, and then you start putting something up and I see something and I'm like, ooh, I was not anticipating that in this space, and that looks a little bit different. What's the best way to approach you when you notice that? And I'm saying this is my fault, right? Like, as the designer, but it's going to happen on the job. So what's the best way to approach you?
It depends on how far we're into the project, right? So, like, if
It's
we're
the
just talking
end.
about,
Okay, let's assume it's the end.
oh man, there is no good way to approach a contractor. No, I mean, I hear what you're saying. Like, I used to, one of my best clients that I ever had was an interior designer, and it was for her own personal house that I was doing work for. And so we did like built-in drywall niches, kind of like your what do you call it? The wall? What
Gallery wall. Well, so
gallery
yeah,
wall? Yeah.
we'll hopefully we'll
So
talk just a minute about the
yeah,
book
I'll
that I
get
have
it
coming.
one of these days. But it was like a built-in recessed niche gallery wall in the drywall with puck lights in there, and she could put her vases and different things in there. I mean, she knew what she was doing, right? And so that's a different, like, if I spend 8 hours doing this custom receipt, and then you come in like, oh, that's like a half inch off, or it doesn't look right, you're gonna wreck their day regardless. Like, there's really no way to
Understandable.
approach that.
I totally get that, right? Okay, that is totally fair. And believe me, the designer does not want to come in and change things. Like, we want to get out just as much as you do. Like, really, at the end of the day, we want to get our check and get out.
Yeah.
I mean, we love these people, but we've got other jobs to do. But then there are times where things do come up. So
Yeah. I think if you're brainstorming, like say you were doing a gallery wall, you hired a handyman or whatever to come hang a bunch of pictures and different things on a wall, and you don't really know where it's going to go. Like, you got to approach that as like, this is a creative process. So like, maybe we put some tape on the wall first. We put blue tape on to see what it looks like. Let's not hang all of the pictures on the wall and then say, I don't like that. Let's move these 4. Like, I think it's just from a prefacing how you approach that, hey, this is a creative process.
That's
Like,
a great way to say it.
We're just trying to fit. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. So any input you got, if you got any ideas, how to make this as painless as possible, let's hear it. It's more like, let's do this permanent thing and then come in the next day and be like, nah, I don't like that. Let's change everything.
Right.
That's when contractors kind of get upset.
Which is totally understandable. I would say, okay, let's just use an example. Let's say we're working on a built-in, and when it's installed, I look at the crown molding and I'm like, oh, that just doesn't fit it. It's not right for the house.
Right.
I might say, hey, oh my gosh, I always try as a designer to start and focus on all the good things, because there are so many good things, right? So like, if I'm doing a built-in in that situation, I'd be like, the built-in looks amazing. This looks so good. And I'm realizing I made not a great choice on that crown molding. Can you help me out? And guys, like I said, I'll talk to the designers. I'll tell them to do this. But can you help me out? What are my options? Right? So I had a contractor once, bless his heart, he's no longer with us. He was so good at this. I was like, oh, exact example. It was a crown molding. I'm like, it just looks so like dinky. It's this big thing, and now it just looks so weird. He's like, what if I stepped out like 3 different pieces? They were just like square boards to make like a fake, to make it look more grand or whatever. He was willing to work with me, and he gave me options. And that probably wasn't the only option he gave me. He probably gave me an option I hated first. And I was like, what else, Joe? Like, give me all the ideas. So look, you guys have to get paid, right? Because if you're not getting paid for your time and expertise, then it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the client. It's not good for me. So I certainly don't think you should have to waste your time on a designer who's just being fussy. But I would ask for you to work with us if you're in a situation. Look, anyone who's going to come in and say that whole thing's terrible, well, they're just a jerk, okay? So we can't fix those people. But I think most designers, they really just want the best outcome. They do not want to redo things. So if you work with them and be like, okay, well, what is it that's bothering you about this? Is there a specific part? If you're willing to make little changes, the designer is going to love you so much, and they will want to bring you on to other jobs in the future. And they may even learn to be a little more thoughtful in the beginning of the process after having had that experience with you.
I think most contractors, they do enjoy like the creative and the feedback aspect of it. So like you said, hey, you got any ideas on how to make that different? I think most contractors would be like, yeah, here's a couple different ways we can do it.
And we love that. Because a designer has an ego too, right? So the designer has to feel like, I'm here to call the shots on the design. So if you give me 3 choices, I'm still calling the shots on the design. But now you've given me choices that are manageable, that are realistic, that are, so we work together in that way.
Yeah. As you were talking, it just kind of hit me. It's interesting because it's really no different. Like, we should have the conversation. It should be the same with a designer that we would have with the homeowner. Like, it's really no different from our perspective. If the homeowner came home and said, oh, Brad, that looks wonderful, but the crown on top seems a little, narrow or whatever. Can we do anything different? In that scenario, we'll be like, yeah, here's 2 or 3 options that we can do. It's the exact same conversation. It's just because this person is a designer.
This person's coming and ruining everything.
The interior decorators here. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
I haven't heard that, and now it will never leave me. I really appreciate that you said that, because and look, I don't expect to be treated like the client in every way, but I would like to be treated like the client when it comes to that. And in return, I said this in the beginning, you know, I want to be on your team too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want to sing your praises to the homeowner. I want to say, didn't he do an amazing job with that built in? And, you know, when I came in, I didn't love the molding, and he was so willing. He was, he or she came up with, like, they gave me 3 ideas, 3 different choices. So I was able to pick the one that best suited our design plan. So, like, this contractor is awesome. Tell all your friends, right? So I hope that most designers would do that as well. Like, if you give us a little bit of that power for the choice, we're going to really sing those praises and take you on the good jobs.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, if you find a good designer, like they can change your business. Truly, it can change your business. Because, like you said, most people who are hire a designer, they're going to be more influential. They're going to have more money, and just
Yeah,
they're going to
there's
be
a
able to
barrier
spend.
to entry. I always say that. Like, you can design, you can hire a designer for an hour, but even that, if you're willing to pay me $200 an hour, you have a certain level of spend that you want to do on your house, and you care, right? Money's not all. You have to be someone who both has the the funds and cares and wants to invest and make it look good. Your pictures are going to look great. By the way, side note, one of my favorite contractors, he and I always go in on pictures at the end of a job. Like,
That's smart.
right there, you're saving money. He's like, I love it because you come in and you put the flowers and you do the things that I don't even think to do or care to do. He's like, and I pay half for the photos. He's like, this is the best thing ever. And for me, it's the best thing ever because I would normally have to pay all of that.
That's actually a really good idea. I've never even thought about that. You guys go in on the cost of a professional photographer. That right there is a gold nugget to
Gold
take
nugget.
home.
We're
Let me.
bringing them.
I want to change topics for a second, and we
Yeah.
may not have enough time to go through all of this, but I want to know your thoughts on interior designers acting like project managers.
Okay. My thoughts are, I don't want to be the project manager, but sometimes I feel like I have to be. So, do you mean when you're working on a job and the interior designer is coming in being like, well, when are those stairs going in? Or,
Well, not from that perspective, like from a financial perspective. So,
okay.
like the contractor is submitting invoices to the designer. The designer is invoicing the client. So they're truly acting like almost like a general contractor or
Hmm.
project manager, and they're wanting to add their markups on stuff and like to do. So, what's your thoughts on
Okay.
that? Just in general.
So it's been so interesting since I started in design, the popular pricing model has changed drastically. I started my business, really, it was 2010 was the official start, but I was already dabbling in 2008, 2009. So it was right after the financial crisis. And one of the reasons that I was able to get teeth early on is because I didn't play that game where I upcharge you for this, I upcharge you for that. I charge by the hour. And that way I don't ever have to sell anything to you because I'm just getting my hourly fee. Now, look, there are times when I order furniture and I get a wholesale discount. I have to take a markup because I will go out of business if I'm doing all the work it takes to
Oh yeah.
maintain those relationships. But when it comes to contractors, I don't believe in marking it up because it's already expensive. And also, it puts this weird feeling between me and the client. So in general, I do not think designers should mark up contractor services. And now let's talk about the flip side of that. So that's just kind of my personal opinion. The flip side is a lot of designers, they are presenting the all-in package, right? Like, hi, I'm your designer. I'm going to make your kitchen amazing. And here's the total bill. So then they're going to hire and buy everything. Business wise, I don't necessarily think it's the best move, but they're going to do that. And if they are the one who has the client and they're bringing you in, then I think the contractor has to just kind of stay out of it. Is it a frustration for you? Is that why you're asking about it?
Not so much a frustration, but I guess it's more along the lines where the designer is now kind of dictating prices to the contractor. because they're looking at it from either a markup perspective or final cost perspective. Like, that's over budget. Brad, you can't charge me whatever
Mm.
$5,000 to put this floor in because we only have $3,000 budgeted. So can you help me out here? And it's like, no.
Right. No, and you shouldn't have to compromise. Okay, so this is interesting.
But
So,
the thing, here's the nuanced thing about contracting, especially if it's multiple trades, like a kitchen remodel. If
mhm,
we're just talking about painting a house where you have one painter come in, totally different scenario than a kitchen remodel where you may have 5 different trades and different vendors and all this stuff, right? Complex stuff going on. And that is whenever a general contractor like myself bids a project like that, we're bidding it as a whole, not as an individual slices of the pie, right? So we're bidding it as a whole pizza. One slice may be 10%, another slice may be 20%, so on and so on. But a lot of times when you're working with like a designer or even like a architects the same way, where they're like trying to be the project manager, they want to just take little pieces,
mhm,
and there sometimes there's overlap. Like the way I hang and finish drywall and do the painting may be coordinated in the way that's efficient and saves me money and allows me to do the project at a certain price point. But all of a sudden, when you say, hey, we're not going to do the drywall until this and this and this, then you just blow all of that
got it.
efficiency out of the water. And then the contractor usually ends up losing the money in the whole deal.
Right. Well, here we go. Communication again, because my feeling is if I know that about how the contractor's working, I want to defend him or her. I want them to get what they need. So if a contractor said to me, "Hey, if you're going to bill the client, that's fine. It's a whole job thing. This is my numbers are based on a whole bunch of things, and I need you to commit to that whole job." The other thing I'm just going to throw out there, and I don't know if this is exactly what you're going at, but sometimes a contractor will give me a bid and they kind of break things down, but it's in these like very general numbers. I
Yeah.
understand you've been doing this for years and you're like, yeah, that's probably going to cost that. But what happens sometimes is a client then looks at this bid and they're like, wait, $5,000 to demo this? That seems like too much. Is that, and then Amy, you have experience. Do you think that's the right number? And I find that really challenging because I recognize that I don't understand what's in that number. I recognize they might be
Right.
renting a dumpster. That might mean 6 guys doing it in 12 hours. I have no idea. So I'll tell the client, look, I can't tell you for sure. I'm not an expert, but I definitely recommend that you ask the contractor personally, because when you guys are bundling these things, but then still breaking it out, then you get this analyzation,
Yeah.
right?
That's
So,
why we don't break out pricing, by the way.
well, part of me is like, should you break out everything? Okay,
No.
so this is really interesting because when we sell window treatments, it's the same thing. And I started my pricing model where I would break it out. The fabric's this much, the labor is this much, this is blah, blah, blah. And then I switched to just a big price. It's hard because sometimes someone picks a fabric that's $300 a yard. Sometimes they
Yep.
pick one that's 30. I mean, that's a huge price difference.
Right.
So I like when contractors break out prices for me.
Oh, who doesn't? Who doesn't like it?
You think it's just too much effort?
So I mean, what I teach and what a lot of contractors do is we're charging premium prices. Like, we're
Yep.
charging more than everyone else. And so when you start breaking out line item by line item, you will lose most of your jobs because people don't, like you said, people don't understand what that means.
Right.
You know what I mean? They don't, like I said, in the contracting world, it's not one individual slices. It's not demo is one slice and framing is one slice. There's overlap between demo and framing on pricing. If you take one out, then the other doesn't work by itself.
Hmm.
And so it's hard to do line item pricing like that. But then again, it's easy to rip apart an estimate when it's like line item pricing and they don't understand
Hmm.
what it is,
But when I
right?
get a line item estimate, I feel like it's really been thought through.
Sure.
So, and then here's
There's not-
just one other thing. Sometimes I'm doing a job, I'm like, okay, I think I want this tile here, but there's a chance we might do hardwood, or we
I
might,
just use allotments.
what was that?
I just use allotments. So
Just
I
use
just use allotments.
allotments.
So it's like, hey, $6 a square foot for tile.
Right. Okay.
You know, if you pick out an $8,
What if I'm like
if
in
you pick
this
out an
room?
$8 square foot, then it's just going to be
Right. It
$2
just changes
more.
it, which
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
very sensible. That makes a lot of sense. What if I'm like, okay, in this bathroom, the client thinks they want a steam shower, but there's a chance we might not do that steam shower. And if we don't do the steam shower, we're going to do a soaking tub. So it's going to change the layout. So can you break it out so that
Yeah.
I can see how much it is with the steam shower and how much it is with the soaking tub?
We can
How
do
annoying is
options.
that to you?
It's very annoying. It's extremely annoying.
Is
We
there,
can do options.
okay,
So it's like here's so here's what we don't want. It takes a lot of time to put the estimate together.
I get
I
it.
mean,
We do
especially if
it.
it's a big project, you could have 8 hours invested in a project and
Yeah.
not even know if you're going to get the job sometimes. Now, we always charge for consultations too, but
Which
that's a
is
different story. So
very
if you're working
good.
with the designer, you're bringing the job to me and like, hey, can you give me an estimate on this job? I'll do it for you because we have a relationship and I'm not going to charge you. But if I do spend 6, 7, 8 hours on a project and then you end up not getting it because whatever, then I lost all that time. Right. So, and if we're doing a bunch of those, then it adds up. But what we would do is an option where it's like, which one are they leaning towards? Like, what's probably going to be the one? You're like, steam shower. Okay, perfect. And you can break out if it's a multi-room or multi-project type of thing. Like, say you're doing a whole house remodel, you're doing a kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and a deck or whatever. Like, we can break it out. Kitchen 80,000, master bathroom 40,000, whatever. You can break it out that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we would just say, bathroom, steam shower, $40,000. Option B, remove steam shower and do soaking tub, 35,000, or deduct $5,000 from the
Right.
total. So that's how
So that makes
yeah.
sense. And I would say that's another one where if you get on the phone with me, the contractor that I work with the most, and he and I just really get along well, whenever he leaves a consultation, he'll give me a call and he'll be like, okay, what do you think? Like, are they leaning toward the steam shower? And I'll be like, well, they kind of want to know the pricing. Like, can you give me an idea? Is it 20,000 more? Is it 60 more? Like, that's where we can really help each other, because there are times when I'm like, look, they are prepared to spend that. They really want this, but they're not going to spend it on that thing over there.
Yeah.
So, he and I can work together and he can be like, oh, great. Okay, I'll source those cabinets from X but I'm going to prepare for the steam shower. So, yeah, it kind of comes back to communication.
Well,
and to follow up on, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, finish.
Well, I was just going to say, to follow up on what you initially asked about that I took us so far off, was you were asking about when the designer's kind of running like a project manager. I respect the contractors who respect themselves, right? So, I need the communication, but if you said to me, hey, Amy, I gave you this bid for the total project. You're now asking me to do this piece of it for less, or you're not doing this piece and it's messing with my books, I'm going to go back to the client and find the money, right?
Yep.
So if I understand where you're coming from, not only will you get what you're due, but like, I'm going to get it for you, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to fight for you, but I have to understand it. If you're just kind of like there and then gone, and I'm like, well, can't he just do this for less? It seems like he's already doing this anyway.
Yeah.
That's maybe where it could go off course.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's different levels, there's different ideas on how to do things. I mean, I personally would not work for a designer if they were trying to be the project manager, unless I was only doing like one small piece. Like if they're hiring me to come in and just install cabinets in an office and that's it, and there's like 5 other trades and they're acting like a general contractor, that's fine. I can do that. But I'm not going to be a general contractor providing all the subs and then you're managing the project. There's no scenario where I would do that.
Well, I agree with that. And I think there needs to be someone who is leading the ship. And if you are really in communication with the designer, then they should be more comfortable with that. They should be happier in that scenario.
Yeah.
It just made me think of how, especially earlier in my career, contractors would offer like kind of a kickback. Like they'd be
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, if you get me this job, I'll give you like 10% back. And I remember there was like one job where I did that. And then I ended up, by the way, giving like so much free time to the client. Like I probably lost money
Yeah.
by taking it
Yeah.
because I felt a responsibility for it. Whereas normally I would have just billed the client and not cared about it, but
Right.
because the contractor was giving it to me. But so anyway, my point is I personally don't expect contractors to give me anything back, but I do expect them to take my phone calls,
Oh yeah.
to show up for and you're saying, of course, and I know probably most people listening to this are like that, but the only thing I ask is, okay, you don't have to give me money. You don't even have to give me a discount in my own home, but be there for me. If it's, the day before Christmas, okay, not Christmas Eve, but if it's the day before Thanksgiving and like something's going wrong, please like pull the one guy and send him over. I ask for the emotional support. That's not really what I mean, but you know what I mean. That's, in my opinion, that's how you build a good relationship. The money is not building the relationship.
Right.
It's here, it's gone.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of like those types of referral kickbacks or scratch my back, scratch your type things. I don't like being a part of that either.
It feels
So
weird.
yeah, it does. I mean, let's just both do an amazing job for the client and get
Right.
paid well.
Yes, absolutely. And the truth is, designers, clients, they want to work with the people who do really good work. And at the end of the day, the price sensitivity is I work with these clients who have a lot of money, and yeah, they'll rip apart your quote. But at the end of the day, they want the good thing, right? They're
Yeah.
willing to pay for it. So I've even said to the one guy I was telling you about, I said to him, look, this client's gonna push back on that number. That doesn't mean you shouldn't charge it.
Right.
I need you to make money because I need you next month and next year. So I
Yep.
need you to make money. I need you to be happy about showing up to this job. I need you to want to take my phone call. So don't cut your prices for this. Charge what is right. I mean, please don't charge a lot just because they have the money, but charge what is
Right.
fair, and then you're going to be rewarded in so many ways.
Yeah. I agree. If I was in your town, I would definitely work with you, Amy.
Oh,
I mean,
thanks.
I
Well,
can
the
tell
feeling
you're
is very
amazing.
mutual.
You have to say that because it's on my podcast.
I mean, no, honestly, based on the way you're describing, really, I want a contractor who's going to stand up for his work. I will work with someone even if there have been mistakes. If they're willing to come back and take care of them, that is more valuable to me than so many other things in contracting.
Again, it's always a relationship. It always comes back to the relationship, and relationships are built on effective communication. So, if you're listening to this and you don't know what to take away from it, other than sharing your photography
Yeah.
costs with your designer, but beyond that, like I've preached this all the time. It's about effective communication. Like one of the skills you need to learn is effective communication, no matter what you do. So,
And asking questions. I would say that the takeaway that I'm getting from talking to you, and also that I hope listeners will take away, is ask questions. If you're thinking like, this doesn't make sense, this isn't working, ask questions. Why are you thinking this? What is it? And hopefully we can all kind of come meet in the middle.
Ask questions, but even one step above that, ask better questions.
Okay. Yes. I like that.
So I think you're located, is it Philadelphia?
I'm outside of
Is that where you're
Philadelphia.
located?
Yes.
Okay. I have a few clients in that area, so I'm going to tell
Nice.
them to come and look you up and like try
Thank
to
you.
do
Well,
some work
please
with
tell them your clients may be a step, further than this, but I wrote a book called The Living Room Design Formula, and it is releasing soon. It's basically what I tried to do is put together an easy guide for someone to create their own living room design so that they don't have to work with a designer. Hey, maybe you have a client that wants a designer, but you don't want to work with a designer on your job. Give them my book. Give them a copy of my book so you don't have to deal with one of us. No, all joking aside though, I have the blessing of always having had too much work. I've always had too many inquiries and not been able to handle them all. And it just makes me feel kind of bad. So I thought, how could I help more people? So I put together this book. It's called The Living Room Design Formula. If anyone out there is interested, they can go to LR Design Formula, LR for Living Room, designformula.com. And that will give them all the info about getting the book. And I also have something that could be useful for your listeners to give clients or work with clients on, which is I have a free PDF on that website where you can get all the instructions to do a really beautiful gallery wall. So maybe you have a client who has just a blank wall and they don't know what to do with it. I'm going to give you these easy step-by-step. It's like 1 or 2 pages. Step-by-step, it tells you which frames to order and to hang something that looks really amazing. So you or client, it could be a great free download for you. So check that out at lrdesignformula.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put the links in the show notes too for
Thank
those of
you.
you that are going online and looking. Okay, I always ask this question of all my guests. What is a book that you're currently reading or one that you would recommend? Obviously, we're going to get your book, but beyond that, what's
I
one
mean,
that you would recommend?
obviously, The Living Room Design Formula is the book to read. Okay, so this is this book for parents. If you have, especially if you have a parent of a teen, it's called Can You Help Me Give a Shit? Am I allowed to curse? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
You can
Sure.
bleep it out. I'm not someone who really curses a lot, but that's the name of the book. If you look it up, it's like, Can You Help Me Give a SH star T? And it's done by this researcher in education. And basically what she found is, a lot of kids aren't interested in school. They can learn so much on YouTube. They see these amazing teachers on YouTube and they're like, why should I sit through Mr. Murphy's math class? So this book is really interesting because this researcher kind of went in and she got all of the details about why kids feel that way and what we can do and how we as parents can kind of give them a really good outlook on how we can kind of step back, not be too involved, but be the right amount of involved. So it was really interesting to me. It's a great book. Anyone should pick it up. It's
Yeah,
by
I've never.
Dr. Rebecca Block.
You said Block?
Yes, Dr. Rebecca Block.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've not heard of that. I'll definitely check it out.
It's a good one.
That'd be a good book for my wife to read.
There you go. Are you saying that you will not take a role in that? Because, my husband's the same way. He'll be like, give me the cliff notes. I'm like, no, read it. He's like, but why? You read it.
I saw a TikTok video, or it was a joke or something, and the guy was like, it was a comedian. He was saying, I use my wife as a storage cloud. So she stores all the information for me. And I was like, that's it. We go out to dinner. I'm like, honey, what do I like here? What do I always do?
Where are my keys? Where?
Use her as a storage cloud for that book. So awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being on the show. Had a great time. Thank you.
I had a great time too. I really enjoyed this, and I hope that maybe we helped at least one relationship between a designer and contractor out there.
I'm sure. Guys, if you are listening to this, make sure to go to the comment section and leave us your feedback. If you're a designer or a contractor,
I want to hear. I am so excited to hear what people think, because a lot of it is a mystery to me.
Well, you got somebody now from the contracting space. If you just want to ask, why do contractors do this dumb thing? Feel free to reach out to me. I'll fill you in.
Thank you.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed it. You know where to find me on the social medias. You can just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. Also, let me get it. I don't have it ready. If you haven't got it yet, make sure you pick up my copy or a copy of my book that I had recently released, The Contractor Profit Blueprint. It's in the show notes as well. And until next time, guys, remember, profit is not a dirty word.